What's up? It's Metal Dave, along with my co-host Jason McMaster, bringing you another episode of the Talk Louder podcast. Our guest today is guitarist Tony Higbee. Tony is probably best known as a member of Tom Keifer's band. He's also a member of Brother Cane lately. Super guy. Our friend Ace Von Johnson from LA Guns is best friends with Tony, and he said, you need to get this guy on your podcast. He's a cool dude. He's got great stories. And he was right. So
I went down the Tony rabbit hole, as it's my new and I learned a lot. I saw his band. He talks about this. I saw his band get fronted by Lizzie Hale and do Aerosmith. They did Nobody's Fault, and I'm just floored. First, the band, I mean, it sounds perfect, and then she's singing, and it's off the chain. It's out of control. That's on YouTube. You guys go check that out.
The band's called the East Side Gamblers.
And then I started there, and I think some of the material I was checking out was like 5 years old or 4 years old or something. Totally standing up, dirty rock and roll, Les Pauls, shred guitar, bluesy guitar, solid, incredible vocals. He, I think, is super humble about his voice, because he didn't really notice in this interview, Dave, he didn't really talk about his singing that much.
Right.
But he's kick-ass. He's better than I think that he's unassuming. If I would have met him before I heard him sing, it was the other way around. I heard him sing before I met him today. Kind of an interesting sort of, wait a second, this guy's a motherfucker, and then you meet him and he's just like a dude, and you're going, whoa, I know what this guy's potential is. He's a lit bomb factory. So it was awesome meeting him and hearing his stories about how he his journey and where he started, humble beginnings. And ladies and gents and rock and rollers, today on the Talk Louder podcast, Mr. Tony Higbee.
All right.
Tony, what's up, man? Where are you right now?
I'm in Nashville.
Okay, that's what I thought. Nashville is like the new LA for rock guys, isn't it?
To be fair, I got here in 2003. So
you've been there.
I beat the rush. I got ahead of the curve.
You and Wolf Hoffman beat the rush.
Yeah, I think I actually met Wolf.
He's been there like 30 fucking years.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. Now, I got here in 2003. Kip Winger got here in 98.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Keifer got here in 96.
All right.
So, but yeah, trust me, I had no affiliation with those guys when I moved here. I moved here to join a band in 2003 and met my future ex-wife the first night I was here. And that kept me here for 15 years. And then I just kind of accidentally kind of got here ahead of the rest of the rock guys and, carved out a couple of gigs for myself before the waters got too thick, so to speak.
That actually sounds like a Nashville song. I got here, met my first ex-wife.
Yeah, I should write that, but I fucking hate country music, so there's that. So
that's fair.
And he lives in Nashville.
I know the irony, right? I mean, I really thought I would be here for 2 or 3 years and, see how the band went and then move on. And then that's just not what happened. So,
where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Central Illinois, like the cornfields of Illinois. Like my graduating high school class was 36 people.
Oh, man.
So, yeah.
Small.
And that is small.
Yeah. Time. And then I went to Western. I went to college. After I went to high school, then I worked a slaughterhouse gig for a year. And that was all the college incentive I ever needed. And then I went to college. And then when I got out of college, I moved to Atlanta for a few years. And then I was there from 2000 to 2003. And then I moved here after that. So,
what band did you move to Nashville to hook up with?
I started playing in this band called Bombshell Crush. I don't know if you know who those guys are or not, or we're familiar with us or not. I moved here to join that band. The guitar player is this guy named Denny Smith, who I grew up with in Central Illinois. And he has a band now called The Great Affairs. but he was a guitar player. And then we had a drummer named Billy Baker, and Billy was in a band from this area that was real big back in the mid '90s called Valentine Saloon, and monster drummer. And they were a killer band. They were like, I don't know, man. They sound like the Cult meets Mother Love Bone. They were just, They were fucking great. And their singer William. Funny side note, we're just going down a rabbit hole. He killer voice, real soulful, very kind of Ian Astbury at times in a good way. He almost was the singer for Velvet Revolver twice. So they were looking at him because Nick Raskulinecz was engineering that album, and Nick's favorite band growing up was Valentine Saloon, and they grew up in the same town together in Knoxville, Tennessee. And Nick had introduced those guys to that band and said, "What about this dude?" when they were looking for a singer. And he said, "I'll never forget. I'm sitting at the board and they're listening to Valentine Saloon and going, 'Oh my God, this could be the dude.'" And then their manager walks in the door and goes, "Hey, what do you guys think about Scott Weiland?" And that was exactly how it went down. So
that's pretty, that sounds like something like, wow, yeah, this guy, look, a squirrel.
Yeah, pretty much.
They get dangled a carrot, oh, we got someone who can sell tickets. Let's get the guy who can sell tickets. Yeah, that's cool.
Let's do that.
I thought when you said Bombshell Crush, I thought I heard of the band, but I'm thinking of a punk rock band called Bombshell Rocks.
Yeah, I think that was after.
Yeah.
Bombshell Crush was like, I don't know, roughly 2003 to 2005.
That's a great name, by the way.
Thanks, man.
So tell us about growing up. When you're a kid growing up, is there music around your house? Do you have musical siblings, parents?
Man, my dad was a bass player. And so a lot of people don't know. Well, let me go back even further than that. My grandfather was a horn player and a singer, played trumpet. And played on WGN back in the day in Chicago, and, really talented guy. And, played with like Buddy Rich, on a couple things on there and stuff like that. Wow. A lot of stuff, but when I was growing up, he had a jazz orchestra called Dick Higbee and the Starlighters. And it's just, what a name, right? So anyways,
love it.
My dad was a bass player. And when I was growing up, and he had a cover band in high school and just after high school called Eternity Road. And I actually started playing bass. I played bass, started playing bass when I was like 11 because I had some friends that wanted to start a rock band, and there was a Hagstrom bass and this big tube Sun amplifier in the house, and it was like, all right, I guess I'll be the bass player, and immediately went down that road, and I was like equal parts into Mel Shacker from Grand Funk Railroad and Cliff Burton, loved, I'm the fucking wah pedal, the overdrive, and I'm, playing for him the bell tolls and, all that stuff, right?
Man, that's a good rig. That's a good rig. You just have
not a
with
bad
a
rig.
Tube Sun. I'm like, damn. That's,
right.
That's 70s hell bass rig. Love it.
Dude, that is some fucking doom metal Sun O shit right there.
Yeah, you're right.
Unfortunately, that's when I learned how fuses work, because I kept blowing fuses in that head, and I put the wrong size in it finally, and smoke smoldered out of the back of it in my friend's house. And
that's rock and roll.
His mom didn't allow us back in the basement for a month, and it took about that long for it to air out. But anyway, so I played bass, but I started learning how to play guitar later in my teens, and I just wrote on guitar a lot, and I love playing guitar. I kept playing out as a bass player and would dabble in guitar and gigs here and there. And I moved to Nashville to play bass in that band. And then when that band broke up, my brother had just moved here from Mississippi, and he's 8 years younger than me. And he was in a band for a little while I was in Bombshell Crush called 100 Watt Opera. And when my thing dissolved and his thing dissolved, I was like, fuck it, I want to front a band and have my brother play in the band. I'll just play guitar because I'm a lot more comfortable fronting playing guitar. And let's be honest, there's 3 bass players on the planet that look cool fronting a band playing bass. I mean, you got Lemmy, Phil Lynott, and Sting, maybe. I don't know.
Gene Simmons.
Gene Simmons.
Yeah, but it's Paul
Geddy Lee.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, Geddy.
Susie Quattro.
All right.
Paul McCartney.
All right, maybe that guy.
Philip Lynott.
I said Lynott.
said
that
Phil.
was my first.
He did
that was
say
my
Phil.
first thing.
Me too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
You can say Phil twice, I think.
you can.
Right.
Actually,
Yeah.
he's so
You can't
good.
say
He's
Phil
so good. He
enough.
qualifies as twice.
He's
Yeah.
like unbelievable. Anyway, that's another podcast.
But I get the point. Yeah, it's rare that a bass player really shines as the front man.
It's tough, man. You know, it's
too
tough.
bad. We need more of those.
And Lynott was a freak because, I mean, God,
Yeah.
if you've ever tried to play bass and sing those songs, there's no, like, I feel like a rock singer, there's a cadence. And with Lynott, it's more like he's reading poetry
Yes.
over the bass lines, and the bass lines are insane. And you're like, Jesus, you know, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, his phrasing is, I think that, not to, like I said, it's a whole other podcast, but what the hell. So I think that it has a lot to do with his Irish folklore upbringing and cadence of how the Irish jig, if you will, kind of goes, and the way that it's a certain vernacular, I believe I have this junk science theory, obviously, but I think it has to do with his upbringing on folk music, Irish folk music.
Yeah.
I think that's where he gets his phrasing, because if you listen to Dire Straits and the way Mark writes his vocal lines, they feel similar sometimes to what Philip is doing. And even the Mark's style and phrasing and choice of notes, even in his solos and such, and the way he even writes rhythms and such. If you look at both of those side to side and really try to make a connection, you will easily.
Yeah, it's not hard. And the other guy would lump into that conversation would be Rory Gallagher.
Correct.
Who I love Rory Gallagher. One of my top 5 influences on guitar.
Yeah, and I have the same theory about a lot of Japanese bands, and a lot of like Akira Takasaki, and then there's a handful of other that are obviously not as big as Loudness, but they hear things differently, and I think they all want to be Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah, they zero in on stuff, but they don't zero in on the same stuff that we do.
Right.
Yeah,
they hear it different.
Totally fair.
They hear it different because of their lore, I believe.
Yeah, for sure.
So you realized you weren't going to be Phil.
Yeah. So I started fronting that band and playing guitar. The band was called Caprice, and we generated some good buzz around Nashville and had some stuff going on. And then, lo and behold, a couple years into the band, I got diagnosed with lymphoma. I had cancer, and so that was kind of it was a trip. It got us a lot of attention for all the wrong reasons. And all the labels that were, the few reps that were coming out to shows and kind of checking stuff out, are like, "Oh, Tony, we're, so sorry to hear about this, man. You're in our thoughts," and blah, blah, blah. And that was kind of it. And, I did 6 months of chemo and I was in remission and kind of went through the whole thing. Wow. But, and I'm very, very blessed and very fortunate to be on this side. And, I've got a much better perspective, I think, on life in general and, the things that are important as a result of having to, kind of go through that and face mortality way younger than most people do.
Yeah.
But it definitely was a situation where after that band almost had a stigma branded to it of, "Oh yeah, that's that band with the guy who had cancer." And, and there wasn't a lot of rock bands in Nashville at the time. We were one of I feel like 5 or 6 in that moment, and we were drawing more than most. So it just kind of flattened out from there and just didn't go anywhere. And so after a while, and after a couple lineup changes, me and my brother decided just to kind of dissolve that band and kind of start fresh and maybe get some of the active rock leanings out of the songwriting and try to be a little more what we felt, sound a little more classic in some ways and harken back a little more to, our 70s and 80s influences, and put together a band called the East Side Gamblers. And we did a few EPs and played a lot, did a lot of shows, had a lot of fun. And that went on for about 10 years with really only one lineup change, which was a drummer after, the first couple of years. And, that was great. We finally got to a point last year where I think that had kind of, I don't know if I'd say run its course, but everybody's lives get, 10 years is a long time. Everybody's lives change, commitments change. You know, you've got people with family stuff that they've got to deal with. It's honestly more important, and family's always first in a lot of ways. At that point, I was busy enough with Tom Keifer and, you know, now with Brother Cane, and before that doing some stuff with just Damon Johnson in a solo capacity, that, you know, it was like, okay, I don't want to, you know, beat a dead horse. When it gets harder to get everybody into a room than it should be, and to, you know, harder to get anything accomplished than it should be, or just get anything done or make any gains or move forward, writing or otherwise, then at that point, maybe it's just time to press pause and just go our separate ways. And I'm not saying never say never with that band, because I love those guys and we have a lot of fun, but just right now, it's just not, it doesn't make sense in this exact moment.
Yeah. Well, I did a little bit of research because I'm just being honest with you. I had to check you out because I didn't know a lot, and I can't even recall. I've seen Keifer a handful of times, saw him on the ship, Monsters of Rock, stuff like that, but I don't know if I've seen him with you in his band. So
I've actually been the guitar player with him since he went solo. I've been the dude for 10 years.
Then I have.
And I've seen you on the cruise.
Right. Okay. So, all right. Yeah. Well, now I feel twice as bad because dude. Well,
I mean, listen,
one of those.
I was going to go upstairs and grab my Dangerous Toys vinyl and hold it up, you know, and show it off. You know,
break it over my head.
No. Listen, I would be lying. I'd be lying if I said I had never possibly cranked 10 Boot Stompin' in my car on stun.
Dave, do you
on more than 10 occasions, you know?
Oh.
So, yeah.
Right. Oh, dude. Rock and roll.
No, dude, I grew up
in
Central Illinois. I played in a band with a guy when I lived in Illinois briefly, this guy named Brian Miner. And
that sounds familiar.
Because he has a podcast now up in the Quad Cities called Minor Disturbance. Yeah. And him and I used to rock that album all the time. We loved it. And we reconnected one time when I was playing through there. He said you did his podcast.
I remember doing his podcast. Yeah, it was the first podcast I'd ever done, and I didn't realize it was actually called a podcast. It was a fucking long time ago.
Yeah. No, it's been a minute ago since I honestly last saw him, because I did that podcast later.
Wow, I'm doing this weird video interview. I didn't realize it was called.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty weird.
So, anyways.
Yeah. Here I thought Tony was doing our podcast just because I invited him. It turns out he's a Dangerous Toys fan. That's why he's doing the podcast.
No. Tony, I'm doing the podcast because you invited me.
I know. I'm just kidding.
Even double time awesome. Listen, I like I was saying, I had to go creep around on you a little bit, and your voice is fucking, dude, your voice is rad.
Thanks, man. Thank you very much.
I caught myself watching videos I went down a little Tony rabbit hole, if you will. That sounds like never mind. Tony rabbit hole. Okay. It's your new name, right? Hey, it's Tony Rabbit Hole. So, and you know, in one of the Gamblers videos, you're wearing a Danko Jones shirt, and I just threw in the towel at that moment. That's all it fucking took. I said, his voice rules. He's shredding on a Les Paul, and he's wearing a Danko Jones t-shirt. He's my new best friend.
Yeah,
nice.
And he's friends with Ace Von Johnson. What could go wrong? Never mind. This
is like domino effect going on. So you're in good company today, Tony, because I just kind of fell in love. And then I was like, what's this over here? Obviously, I'm on YouTube, and they show all this other shit on the side. And there's a bunch of live Lizzie Hale shit fronting your band.
So what that's about is me telling you guys about, you know, being sick and having cancer. When I was sick, a couple of friends from when I lived in Atlanta and from when I lived in Nashville, friends came together in both places, and they actually did benefit shows to help me offset some of the cost of the medical bills. Because let's be honest, with or without insurance, having cancer can bankrupt you in no time.
Yeah.
And
Cancer.
I didn't go bankrupt, but I literally had just got married and just bought a house that year, so it was scary. I wound up selling all my guitars except for like two. And we didn't lose the house, but it was touch and go for a while, but those friends really helped me out. So I started doing this cancer benefit that was, kind of an as needed thing for a while called chemokazi. And what I would do is like, as we all get older, we all have friends that are affected, unfortunately, by cancer. And it becomes more of a part of our lives because it's just what happens, sadly. So I said, fuck it. I want to give back. I want to help people like people help me. So whenever there'd be a situation where we would have a friend in need for, that reason, or thereabouts, I would do a show that was almost annual for a few years, where the East Side Gamblers would become the backing band. And we come out and we do a mini set, and then we would have guest singers and guest performers come out and play with us. And Lizzie, we did 3 or 4 of those pretty much almost in a row. And she came to every one of them and sang like a half a dozen songs every night and just crushed.
Dude, I play on Nobody's Fault and I lost my shit.
Dude. Yeah.
Dude. That's what dude. And the other guy goes, dude.
Yes. You can watch that video and just look over. You can look at me and Brad Whitford's over there working that wah pedal during the solo. And I just got this fucking grin on my face that is still there every time I talk about it.
I bet.
Just amazing. So, Lizzie singing Slave to the Grind one night, with Snake and Rachel with us. We had there's one shot of us doing Highway Star that was a blast with her singing, and Jimmy Chalfant was playing drums and Rachel was playing bass, and just a lot of just fun moments like that. Keifer's come out and done them. It's pretty. I got the joy of being able to play with a lot of people who I truly love and respect, and that was the huge thrill for me. But at the end of the day, taking all that money and giving it to that person who really needed it. And it really helped them along. The last one we did, I know we paid for that girl's entire deductibles for her cancer treatments for the next year.
Wow.
And that was just it was awesome, So, and that was our drummer's wife's best friend.
Good for you, man.
Yeah, thanks, awesome. Dude.
That's awesome.
A lot of people can easily forget, and I'm not trying to be mic drop kind of moment here. I'm just saying it's super easy to make someone's day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you put that together and
make it happen, and it's you want to play some rock and roll songs tonight? Give someone a chance, bag of money for some friends, kick ass, let's go.
Yeah, dude, when those benefits happen for me, those are two of the most amazing nights of my life. For as shitty as I felt and as sick as I was, I even was asked hey, when they did the Atlanta show, I was like, are you healthy enough to play? Or if you are, would you want to play in this band with a few of your friends, some different people singing? I was fuck yeah. And luckily I wasn't too sick and I managed to do it. And the band was like me, Mike Froh just playing drums, which I don't know if you guys know Mike or not. He's an Atlanta staple. He was in a band called Double Drive. He played in Black Label Society for a while. The guitar player is this guy named Danny Grady from Injected, who was one of my favorite bands down there. And then the other guitar player was Troy McClawhorn, who's now in Evanescence. And Troy used to be our roommate, and we've been buddies for years. And then there were other guys that played too, like Rockets to Ruin played that night. So like Rob Hammersmith, who I think you probably know, Jason. And, just a lot of friends. It was so special. Just the feeling that all these people would go out of the way to do something that nice for me was just the most amazing feeling ever. So if I have the opportunity to take that feeling and pass it on to anybody who's going through that, I love that. That's the payoff right there.
That's really cool that you paid it forward and didn't forget. And when you had the opportunity to do the same for someone else, that you did it. That's hats off to you, man. How long have you been on the other side of this? How long have you been?
Man, I just figured it out the other day. It's been 15 years.
Oh man, that's fantastic.
15 years in June. So I think that was when I finished chemo.
That's outstanding. Man,
yeah, man.
We're happy for you, man.
Thank you so much.
I didn't know that. That's
a lot of people don't. And I'm not crazy public about it. I think when you've been sick, when I was sick anyways, I spent a lot of time talking about it while I was sick. And I probably spent a lot of time talking about it for a while after I was sick. But then after a couple of years, you're just like, okay, that's in the past. Like, I'm moving on. I hope it's never in the current again. But as of right now, it's in the past. And I'm just going to keep going forward and get on with my life, But if somebody needs some help, I'm going to be there.
Showing that you're human. I mean, it's traumatic and it's causes worry with you and your family financially and mentally, physically, obviously. And
yeah,
you're kind of swimming without, you can't see the shore. So yeah, you gotta, talking about it was probably part of your treatment mentally anyway, talking about it.
It was for sure. I'm sure there's probably a few people around me at the time who were sick of hearing about it, but and apologies to them, but it definitely was it was a little bit of purging just to have those conversations with people. I never minded when somebody asked me how I was doing. I never minded when anybody asked me questions. And to this day, if somebody is, having a scare or going through something like that, they need somebody to talk to about it. I'm an open book. They can call me anytime, and I've been that person for a few people. And, once again, that's a good feeling just to be able to have somebody there to comfort them and help them, kind of once again pay it forward and help them try to figure out how to navigate those waters while they're in them.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. So the question you've been asked a million times, but our audience might not have heard it. How'd you get the Keifer gig?
All right. I have been asked this question a good amount of times. I never mind answering, man.
I'm sure.
It's a funny story. So it's not the shortest story, but I'll try to rein in it a little bit. So when I moved here and joined that band, there was another band in town who was doing some shows called Naked Beggars. And Naked Beggars was Eric Brittingham's band, side band at the time with his wife at that time, Inga. Right? So, yeah. So anyways, I got to know Eric. We had played a couple shows together. That's kind of when I met Eric. And they were looking for a utility musician, like piano, background vocal, or keys, background vocals, whatever. Turns out my sister-in-law, or my future sister-in-law, at that time, she was kind of the perfect candidate. She could sing like a bird, play piano, she could play fiddle, she could, she could write. She just kind of did it all. So her name was Christine. I kind of sent her to their camp, and they hung out and got along great. And she wanted to be into the band, and for its entirety. So that was how I met Eric. And after that, Jeff moved here, joined the band. That's how I met Jeff. Fast forward a couple years, I worked at Guitar Center, and I ran the, kind of the vintage and platinum high-end bougie guitar division. And if they ever need anything, they'd hit me up and I'd take care of them. And they sent Fred in because Cinderella was going to do some shows, and Fred needed a couple things, and he was in from LA and they were rehearsing. So I met Fred. Fred got to know me a little bit and was asking about my band. And at the time, it was still Caprice. And he asked when we were playing again. We happened to be playing a couple nights later. He came out and watched our set and then hit me up and was just gushing about the band. And, was going to make comments about, I'm going to tell Tom, we got to take you guys on tour, blah, 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 blah. It was very sweet, And Fred's always been super cool. All those guys have. So the last guy in Cinderella I meet is Tom. And he got sent to me because he had a real valuable old guitar he didn't want to take on the road anymore, but he wanted something similar for it, but like a new custom shop version to replace it, a Telecaster. And so he got sent to me, and I sold him one, and got to talk and got to know him a little bit. And he's one of those dudes that if you've never met him, he's real guarded and he's real quiet and he doesn't talk very much. But once he gets to know you, and once you kind of get over that hump, then he's a little bit more of an open book. You know what I mean? And just the sweetest guy. So I helped him with a couple things along those lines. And I don't even remember what it was he was looking for, but he hit me up and came in one day looking for something. And he was sitting at my desk and he goes, he's talking about, yeah, this and this and blah, blah, blah. And I may come back and see you in a couple of weeks. He goes, man, he goes, I did this solo record and I'm going to go out and try to tour it next year. And I need to get a different amp. I'm thinking about getting a different amp. I've been taking these old Marshalls, the same old Marshalls out since 1986. And they're crazy loud. And we did a lot of club gigs on this first run. And I'm just not sure how durable they're going to be and on and on and on. And, just kind of said that. And I'm at my desk and all I said was, I just casually said, oh, you're doing a solo record? He goes, yeah. And he goes, it's strange. He goes, I've never played with anybody but Cinderella. He goes, that's been my band forever. He goes, I haven't played with different musicians in, since 1986.
Yeah.
Fred's been in the band since 86,
Yeah.
And he goes, it's the only band I've played in. I don't know what that even looks like. He goes, so I got to put a band together. And I just very casually said, well, if you need help with that, hit me up. That's all I said. So anyways, a couple days, like 4 or 5 days later, I get a phone call from Tom. Hey, are you going to be at the shop today? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, cool. What time do you guys open? I'm like, 10. He goes, cool. I'm going to come down and see you. I'm like, all right. I get there. He walks in right at 10 o'clock, comes into my office. And the room's just full of like high-end guitars and amps, right? Closed doors. And he goes, yeah, so show me a couple things. What you got? So I plug into an amp. And here you go, check this guitar out. And he's like, oh man, this sounds great. And he's playing, and it's Tom Keifer. His vibrato's like 6 feet wide. It's just, sounds amazing. And he goes, oh yeah, it sounds killer. He goes, hey man, do me a favor. He goes, sit down and play real quick. Let me stand back here and just kind of listen to it and see how it sounds from, 5-10 feet away. So I sat down and started playing. And I'm pretty sure if I had to guess, I probably sat down and started playing UFO riffs, having no idea that he's a massive UFO fan, specifically Shanker, And anyways, he's like, oh, that sounds badass. Yeah, Shanker, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, stop. All right, cool. That gives me some ideas. Hey, do you guys where's the acoustic section? Walk over, go to the acoustic room, sit down. We're playing a couple guitars. I'm handing a couple things. And we're in this kind of small room where all the high-end stuff is. And there's a sliding door, and he reaches over and he slides the door shut. He goes, so did they ever let you leave here? And I go, man, I clock out at 5 o'clock every day. Like, what are you talking about? And he goes, no, could you go on tour? And I'm like, well, yeah, what do you mean? He goes, well, I got to put this band together. I love the way you play. I hear you're a good singer. Man, I'd love to get together and just jam and see what happens. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Right. And if you backtrack just a little bit, evidently that first time he was in the shop and I made that casual comment, he walked out the door and picked up his cell phone and called this guy named Blair Daly, who lives here in Nashville. Blair's a songwriter. Blair, I know because I met him at a party at James Michael's house when James lived here for a few years. You guys know who James is from 6 a.m. and produced all that Motley stuff like Saints of Los Angeles and stuff. James lived here for a few years and we got to be good friends, and he's responsible for getting me to start playing golf again for the first time since my teenage years. And that has stuck thanks to him. And there's still golf clubs under the bus to this day. But he introduced me to Blair, and Blair's a songwriter, and they'd written together. And him and Blair used to come out and watch Caprice shows. And evidently when Tom went out, he called Blair because he was trying to figure out some guys. He called Blair and he goes, hey man, do you know a guy named Tony Higbee? And Blair goes, oh my God, he'd be perfect. That's the dude. And that's how that happened. Turns out that Blair is Tom and Savannah's son's godfather. Blair, and I had no idea. And Blair and Savannah used to write all the time. And now Blair's part of this writing, a collaboration here in Nashville. I think people call them the Four Horsemen. And they're like this big songwriting group. I think it's him and maybe Marty Fredrickson and a couple other dudes. And they're writing all this stuff on people's records. And Blair's just one of the nicest guys ever, just a great dude. But that's how that started. A couple weeks later, I'm playing a show at 12th and Porter with, it was early stages with the East Side Gamblers at that point, one of the, probably the first 6 months of the band. And people start walking up to the stage going, hey man, Tom Keifer's here. And I'm like, what? And they're like, he's in the back of the room. And I looked up and I could see his silhouette, you know. But you got to understand, in Nashville, back anytime really, but especially then, a Tom Keifer sighting was like a Sasquatch sighting. It's like you knew he was around, but you just never saw him. It was just like he was lurking in the distance somewhere, and you just never knew. You know, my drummer and Bombshell Crusher show up at rehearsal. Man, I saw Tom Keifer at Home Depot today. I'm like, really? What did he look like? He was wearing like sweats and a t-shirt with a bunch of holes in it, but he had the rings and the necklaces on, and he still looked like Tom Keifer. And I'm just, okay, you know, you don't argue with that. So you got a real distinct look. And now I've seen Tom on a bus for 10 years, and I know exactly the look that he's talking about because it's pretty much a daily occurrence. That's what he looks like at sound check every day. So,
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yes.
But anyway, so that's kind of where that started. And then, you know, he actually was kind of interested in my whole band, but the other guys really couldn't commit to anything like that at the time. I brought in Paul Simmons, the drummer. Paul brought in Billy Mercer, the bass player. And then Tom brought Paul Taylor in, and that was the original incarnation of that band. And it's been 10 years ago now. So,
wow.
Paul,
what was your first, you kind of told me your first impression of Tom, but now that you've been with him for 10 years on a bus, et cetera, was there any first impressions about him that have changed over time now that you've gotten to know him more?
Good question.
Man, you know what? I guess I always had a great relationship with Tom from the very beginning. He was always very sweet to me. Now, when we first went out in a touring situation, there were a couple guys in the crew who had known him for a long time. And I think they were almost a little overly protective of him to a point where it was almost like they acted kind of like a buffer, or they tried to act like a buffer between him and the rest of the band. And that was a little weird at first. And there was a few months of awkwardness there. But once Tom made it apparent to them and to everybody in the band that there was no need for a buffer and that we're all family, that's kind of how it's been ever since. And I mean, he really treats the band like family. I mean, you know, he's always been super fair to us as far as, you know, monetarily speaking. I've got multiple raises I've never asked for. He takes the whole band out for, you know, Christmas dinner every year, band crew, wives, girlfriends. He's, you know, if I picked up the phone and called him and I was stranded on the side of the road at 3:00 in the morning, he'd come help me change a tire. He's just real salt of the earth. He's a great guy. He's a great person. You know, whenever anybody's having family issues, you know, him and Savannah will call and check and make sure everything's okay. When I was going through my divorce a few years ago, you know, they were checking up on me. When we made that last record, Rise, me and the bass player, Billy, were both in the throes of our divorce. And it was a super dark time for both of us. And, you know, they had their finger on that pulse and they were checking in on us and, you know, just making sure we were good and talking to us when we weren't, you know. And, you know, that's kind of the best way to sum him and Santa up, really, you know.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about Rise, because
hold on a second.
What's up?
He said Paul Taylor, and I wanted to hear you tell us some Paul Taylor stories, some Paul Taylor isms.
We had Paul Taylor on our show, and he was one of the coolest, nicest guys. And we kind of had him. We kind of weren't expecting him. We kind of snagged him as he was walking by. We were at the Rock and Pod convention in Nashville, and we just kind of grabbed him and sat him down and started talking. And we had vague idea of who he was, of course, but the stories were incredible. He was a much deeper individual than I think either Jason or I realized, and sweet as can be. And the stories were amazing. And I think we both walked away with a whole new respect for Paul Taylor. So now it's your turn.
I love Paul Taylor. He has never been anything but the sweetest guy to me. He's very funny. There are things about his personality that just literally his presence in a room to me it just makes you smile and sometimes laugh. I've never met a human being who's more addicted to Twizzlers. When he was in the band on the rider, every day there would be one of those giant, like 1 pound bag of the red Twizzlers, and he'd be like sniffing, oh, fresh Twizzlers, and he'd like just sit there and he would house that bag daily. Like he loved Twizzlers. He's also deathly afraid of flying. To the point where we don't do a lot of fly gigs, and honestly, I don't know that we've done more than I can't think of any fly gigs we've done except for flying down to the cruise when we've done that since he's left the band. But we do a few, and Paul was one of those guys that if we had to fly somewhere, if he thought he had the time and could get in his car and just drive there ahead of us, he'd do it. But on a rare occasion he was on a plane, he made the mistake of sitting next to me a couple times, and I'd just be sitting there because that doesn't faze me. I'm sitting there. I remember vividly there was this flight and it had pretty bad turbulence, and I'm reading a magazine or a book or something, and he's sitting right next to me, and he is just white knuckle on the handles of that seat, man. Just like it's just ooh, and he's freaking out, and there'd be like ooh, like oh god, did you feel that? And I'd just sitting there just putting my mask in. Yeah, man. Oh my god. Yeah, that one felt bad, Paul. And I just, and then there was like this one like huge dip, and then like where it felt like we dropped 500 feet, and then the whole fuselage just creaked like it twisted. And Paul's like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, man, that's not good. And I'm just like, he's losing his mind next to me. I don't think he ever sat next to me on a plane after that, but he does not fly well. That is not his bag. So, but I love Paul. I think he's hilarious. And I got to spend the summer with him this year because Winger was out opening for us. And, just world-class band, amazing musicians, and, just world-class people. Paul's just a great guy. He really is.
That was the thing I think that another thing we walked away from that interview with was just how talented he is as far as he could play any instrument. He's an amazing songwriter. And I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. And me and Jason just left there going, wow, that guy was amazing. He was
still talking about him. So
yeah, I know. Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. No, he's such a nice guy. And I mean, he's always got a smile on his face, and he finds his glass is always half full, and that's kind of what makes him enjoy to be around.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the Keifer album Rise. That's Tom's second solo album, I believe. Is that right?
Yes.
Are you on the first one, or did you not come aboard until the second one?
Well, the first one, the original version of the first one that came out was done before he ever put the solo band together. He had finished that record, and him and Savannah had kind of slowly worked on that record over the course of I don't know. I've heard 6 years. I've heard 8 years, just kind of, he's got a studio in the house, and he just work on stuff as he went. And, before they know it, they just one day went, wow, I think we actually have a record here. It was just kind of recording songs from time to time and different players and stuff like that. But then when they repackaged it, made a deluxe edition out of it, and re-released it, there's a couple of bonus tracks on that, and I've played on those. So we recut. It sounds sacrilege to say it, but we recut "Nobody's Fool," and Tom and Lizzie Hale duetted it, and then and that's on there. That's one of the tracks, and then the other one was we do a cover, kind of the Cocker take of "Get By With a Little Help From My Friends,"
Nice.
And that's on there. That was kind of one of the first things we ever worked out on the deck in a rehearsal room that wasn't already a Tom Keifer song that was recorded before the band, or a Cinderella song, So, and we actually just put that back in the set this year. Been out for a few years, and it's been in the encore. It's a lot of fun to play, but especially with the girls, the background singers, and just kind of those stacked gospel type harmonies. It's just sounds massive. But so I'm on those couple tracks on that. And then the new record, it's the whole band.
Yeah.
So
So my question then is, Tom obviously uber talented in every respect, musician wise, songwriter wise, vocal wise. When you're in a band with him and he's cutting a solo record and you're part of the band, how diplomatic is the songwriting process, or is it basically the Tom Keifer show and you guys play along, or is he open to input? If so, how much? Tell us a little bit about that chemistry.
Well, okay. So, with Tom, he wrote the bulk. I think I'm correct in saying that he wrote the bulk of the Cinderella stuff. But, in him and Savannah, the thing I figured out about them is they kind of, especially with him, he doesn't ever say, okay, it's time to write a record. He just doesn't force the issue. And then when the inspiration comes, he writes a lot in a real short amount of time. You know what I mean? That's kind of that last record came about. It came together like they wrote that record in weeks. To the point where I got to be honest, I kind of missed a window to contribute to the writing. But at the same time, I was in such a dark place from my divorce that it was dark beyond the point of being, oh, this could make for some really good material. It was dark in a, just I fucking hate everything and I want to kill people. Like, it was awful. It was really bad. And it was just like all this really negative raw emotion that was bottled up, and it wasn't going to come out into anything positive or remotely uplifting, and there was no way to put a positive spin on the emotions that were going to come out of me if I tried to write a song. And every time I tried to, it just sucked because it was just too much. Bleh. So, but to that end, him and I have had discussions, and he's always open to the idea of getting in a room and, hashing out ideas and stuff like that. He's always got an open ear. Now, as far as the playing and the getting together, outside of the nucleus of the actual song, and working parts out and all that stuff, we worked that whole record out in a rehearsal room. He would come in with the song idea. We were all there set up, and originally started tracking. It's just supposed to be pre-pro demos. And then after a couple of days realized that our drums and even our bass were sounding so good that we could actually get the takes for the album where we were doing it once we got the feel and the vibe that we wanted. And then Tom and I were plugged into some direct things just to be able to keep the noise out of the room. And we were just going to recut the amps later. Same with keys and stuff like that. So everything was in headphones, but, we were all coming up with our own parts on the fly. He might have a little input here and there, but for the most part, he was letting us all just kind of create and play what we were hearing. And he trusted everybody in the band as musicians to play what was right for the song. And, he was very diplomatic about, it's something as menial, I guess you could say, as guitar solos. Like, I wasn't thinking about it. He sat down with me one day and goes, okay, so I'm looking at the record and there's 10 songs. This song doesn't have a solo and this song doesn't have a solo, but you've got these 4 solos and I've got these 4 solos. Is that cool? I'm like, yeah, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't, I wasn't really thinking about it. I wasn't keeping score, but I think it speaks volumes that he actually considers that, you know, and isn't just like, it's my band, I'm going to play all the solos, but you can have this one on this, on the 4th song on the second side, He's just, it was super cool. It was it's bad of a time as I was going through. We were making that record. It was a joy to make that record. That was the most positive thing that was happening in my life at that moment.
You obviously you're very grateful for the opportunity to be in Tom's band and go out and play these gigs, and obviously a lot of it is tilted towards Cinderella as you would expect.
Yeah.
How difficult for you as a great musician in your own right and a creative person, is there a point where you're wishing that we would hurry up and get more solo material out so that you're playing stuff that you actually were recorded and maybe had it 50-50 mix, or is that never going to happen because the fans always want Cinderella? Or where are you in that mix?
Well, what I don't want to do, I guess, is, I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like I'm a fan of the bands that I love every bit as much as I am a musician. And I'm the guy that if I'm going to go see a rock show and I can't wait to see a band, I'm not going to be the jaded asshole standing in the back of the room with my arms crossed. Like, I'm going to go get up close to the stage and try to get my face knocked off by 412 cabinets and, a singer screaming in my face. So to that end, I see that in the audience when I'm playing, and I want them to be happy. I don't want them to be bored. I don't want them to be checking out. And I recognize that, I mean, let's be honest, man. Cinderella's heyday were those first 3 records. And Tom had a lot of hits in that band. We've actually been pretty fortunate. We've had, a song or two from each of these solo records get some traction, on rock radio enough that it justifies us having them in the set. And people generally know, and the audience generally know those songs. But the last thing I want to do is hammer people over the head with deep solo cuts that they're not going to respond to and subsequently get bored, and then there's no energy to feed off of. And that just makes it harder to play a good show, I mean, listen, if I'm a Tom Keifer fan and I go see a show and he doesn't do Somebody Save Me, I'm probably going to be pissed. So,
yeah.
Well,
I got to say, I saw you on the last 2 tours when you came through Texas. I saw you in Cedar Park. So I saw you just about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, whenever that was.
At the very hot spot.
At the very hot spot. Actually, you guys got a break. I think Faster Pussycat was in town 4 weeks before you, and it was 107 degrees that day. But yes, it is the very hot spot. And then I saw you the year before at the very same venue with LA Guns and Faster Pussycat, and the set list was phenomenal, and the people responded, and it was fantastic. And I loved that you guys put together great packages. Like, I'm a huge LA Guns Faster Pussycat fan, so when you were on tour with those guys, that was it for me. And then this recent go around, Winger wasn't in at the gig that I saw. You had John Corabi. But Karabi came out with just an acoustic guitar and a bar stool, and I'm thinking, what? Where's his backing band? How's he going to open for Keifer with just an acoustic guitar and a bar stool? And he was awesome, man.
He was so good.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are giving the people what they want is kind of what I'm getting at here, and it was awesome. It was great performances, and a lot of memories come rushing back with all those songs, as you said. Tom and Cinderella had a lot of hits. I'm not sure people think of them in the same breath as they think of like a Motley Crue or a Rat or a Bon Jovi. But if you go to a concert, you're like, oh yeah, that one too. Oh, there's another one, And
yeah. I mean, they legit had hits that we can't fit in the set,
Yeah.
Have to rotate a thing in and out here and there. Like, there's a year that we opened with The More Things Change, which we had never played, and that was a bona fide hit. This year we're playing Hot and Bothered.
Yeah.
And it's the first time we played that song the entire time I've been in the band with them,
Wow.
So there's always stuff like that. I mean, if you go back and look at the first year, the label was encouraging us at the time to do make it an intimate night, do deep cuts, sprinkle some stuff in there. And we were doing like some deep Cinderella cuts, and we were doing a lot off that first solo record, but we were playing to, 300 cap bars, in a lot of places. Mm-hmm. So we would go there and you hear us play like One for Rock and Roll off of Heartbreak Station, which, super deep cut, but a great song. We were doing like a slide blues version of Shake Me that I was playing dobro on. We were, we had like this whole like 5-song acoustic set in the middle. We were, doing probably 5 tunes off that solo record, 4 or 5 of them. And, and that was cool in that intimate setting. But man, when you start to get into the bigger venues and start playing theaters, you got to keep that energy up. And, I think people want to pump their fist to Shake Me. They don't need the bluesy bar version of it,
Yeah.
So it's fun as it is to play sometimes, but
sure.
But yeah,
Yeah, it was great. And Tom, again, I was reminded of what an extraordinary talent. I mean, he would start a song on piano and then push it aside and finish, then he would take a guitar solo and then he'd take the guitar off and hand it up to, and then he would finish out the vocals. And I mean, he was going through 3 instruments a song.
Dude,
it was
absolutely
great.
Sometimes, man, especially when we're doing like Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone, or when we're doing a Heartbreak Station and he's playing lap steel, and an acoustic, and it's a lot. Trust me, I've got 9 guitars on the road with him, and it's not a vanity thing. It's different tunings and different sounds, and there's an acoustic, there's a baritone I play for the end of one song. There's a double neck that I play for 2 or 3 songs every night. There's 3 times a night where I've got an acoustic on a Gracie stand in front of me, and I'm going back and forth between that and electric. There's a lot of moving parts on that stage. It's and he's doing all the same things,
Yeah.
But just trying to get it to sound as good as we can. Plus, with all those vocals.
We talked about Tom at some length during a recent interview we had. Brian Slagle, CEO of Metal Blade Records.
Yeah.
On the show, and
I'm a massive fan of Brian. I've never met him or talked to him.
You got to meet him, man. I mean, we're not close to him. I mean, me and Dave have been in the same room with him before, but we're not close. And then we got him on the podcast, and we were totally giddy about that because we're metalheads, but we're Metal Blade heads, and we're admire his empire,
Mm-hmm.
But it's either me or Dave brought it up, but he even goes, "Oh my God, those fucking songs!" And it's like, dude, the fucking CEO from fucking Metal Blade is talking how kick-ass and talented, and how he's just a man of so many hats, and how dirty fucking heavy the first Cinderella Night Songs is, and just. I mean, the title Night Songs, and I mentioned this in the interview with Brian. The song Night Songs is like the scariest, most haunted, freakish. I mean, what kind of it's own thing with the whole. It's like ghostly.
Yeah.
I actually covered that song with some friends of mine years ago, and I still have it on my hard drive. And every once in a while, that's the version I go, listen, this whole thing? Oh, shit. Oh, fuck. Yeah. But that song is a motherfucker. And Brian was like, oh, yeah. It was like he was in the game talking about Tom Keifer. I was like looking kind of like, wow, we're hanging out with Brian Slagle talking about Cinderella.
That's awesome.
Yeah, kind of a cool, weird little, thing. And we all agreed actually that, like, not to go deep, but Cinderella is kind of the wrong band name for what Tom does.
I think
the glammed out thing, and then the name of the band, and then you listen to the record, you're like, holy shit, these guys are like gonna kill you when you hear the song, and then you see the album cover, you're like, what?
There's a little disconnect, I guess. Yeah.
Elusive and disconnected and weird in a way. No, I'm not mad about it. It was sign of the times and trends being followed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I really truly think there are, coming from a fan perspective,
sure.
And make no mistake, I was a huge Cinderella fan,
Sure. Well,
I can tell you where I was the first time I heard Night Songs. I can tell you where I was the first time that I heard Long Cold Winter, and there's still nights where I'm on stage on an occasion. I'll look over and he's singing. I'll just look over and go, man, I cannot believe I'm in a fucking band with this guy.
Yeah. That's cool.
But it's cool. It's a great feeling, man. But I will say, I do think that there's this handful of bands from that decade that get unfairly lumped into, for lack of a better term, because it's a shitty term, but the hairband thing. And it's simply guilt by association. Like they were just happened to be around at the wrong time. And yeah, they made fashion decisions in that time period, like everybody else, that it didn't help their cause.
I wouldn't know that. I personally I would not know anything about that.
Jason doesn't know anything about that.
Nothing, not at all. So, but and let's be honest, man. You look at that cover of Night Songs, and you don't expect that album to sound like that,
right?
Right.
And I think if you take Cinderella, I think if you take Tesla, I think if you take Kicks, I think there's and there's more bands that could be named, and you take their material, like if let's say you take Night Songs, made in '86, on the heels of Pyromania being the biggest record on earth, and you can hear it in the production of Night Songs. But you take that record and you put it out in '78 with Mutt Lange producing, and it's going to sound like the heaviest fucking AC/DC record ever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I also think you could take that album and you could have it come out in 1994 with Brendan O'Brien producing it, and it would have had legs then too. But I feel that way about all those bands. I feel that way about Kicks. I feel that way about Tesla. I think, we could all point to bands from that period that are just like, man, never mind the image, never mind the production with the shitty giant arena reverb gated drums and, all the bullshit that was going on, and the bass is so far down in the mix that you're not even sure if the guy was there for the session, and give it a different production treatment, put it in a different time, and the record would probably be viewed in a more timeless manner than it is, just because of that window of time that it came out.
That is an excellent spin.
I love that.
So much shit.
Yeah.
I just got goosebumps.
Well, I mean, there's just so many records that got, okay. So I was listening to Eddie Trunk's show the other day in my car, and they were discussing Slave to the Grind by Skid Row, what a heavy record that was. And, versus the first record, which definitely was a little slicker, but, had amazing songs on it too. You can't deny the songs on that first Skid Row record. Also another band that, I think transcends a lot of the bands from that period. And, because dirty rock and roll is dirty rock and roll. It's a great thing. I'm pretty sure Jason will attest to. But Slave to the Grind came out and it debuted number one on Billboard, like in April of '91, I think it was. Nevermind came out in September of '91. And, you can just see everything change after that record came out. All those bands just get shoved into, obscurity immediately, and all the labels just pulled their back, and it was like MTV was like, nope, you're done. And that's it. It was like really brutal, really hard to watch. And, I mean, Jason, maybe you can attest to that, because I feel like you lived that a little bit,
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was like a ditch. It was like house cleaning.
Yeah. And so, but you look at that Skid Row record, it debuted at number one. I saw them on that tour, and the opening band was Soundgarden. Wow. On the Bad Motorfinger tour, right as Outshine was blowing up. And that it's to see that package together, it didn't seem weird. It didn't seem disjointed. Soundgarden opening for Skid Row.
Badass show.
It was fucking great. And they gelled together. They jived together. It didn't seem like strange. I mean, you're not going to see Soundgarden open for Poison.
Right.
That wouldn't make sense.
Right.
But,
Skid Row had Pantera open the tour for them that same.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but then you see all the grunge thing explode and Nevermind come out. And it's like that album started off so strong, it didn't sell nearly as many as the first record, even though it debuted at number one on Billboard. But if you look at the timeline, they got Monkey Business out, which was a huge single. What was the second single? Slave to the Grind, which did okay. Mm-hmm. But then they released In a Darkened Room, I think, was the next one, which the ballad was always that, that was the one, right? And it did nothing. But I'm pretty sure that if you look at the latter two singles from that record, they came out after Nevermind. And the label probably just went, nope, I'm good, and just backed off of it.
They didn't even try. There was too much hope for the other thing to
shiny new toy was
right. Shiny new toy. Yeah. It was going to rocket ship to the moon. There was no doubt, and all the money was over there. But choices were made. That's your point. Choices were made to like look the other way.
Yeah.
And I get it. People forget that it's a business, and that you know it's that kind of the dollar bills blowing this way, and that's exactly what happened. What made me angry about that, and this is just a perspective, is that there were a lot of people that would, much like the labels, and they didn't have to be like the labels, and these are fans, and I'm not talking about in particular any one that I know personally, but there was a lot of people that just stopped listening to dirty rock and roll and started listening to whatever was trendy. And I'm like, oh, so when the season changes, you wear a coat. When it gets cold, wear a coat. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is not the winter. This is music. This is part of who you are. Yeah. This should be part of your DNA. You love this or you do not love this. You love this today, but you don't love this tomorrow. That was something that, and I said angry. I didn't get angry. Do whatever the fuck you want. But the point is I just saw that shift as well. And I'm like, that's your human interaction with where you're placing your emotional value on when you hear a song or a band and you love, and the next day you're ripping their poster down and going to the mall to buy a new wardrobe. That doesn't commute. It doesn't compute. It doesn't turn. It doesn't. I don't know what happened when bands kept doing and writing the same, being themselves through the fire, through the shitty, the dark times. Those are the people that are still kind of legacy band and still kind of doing what they are, no matter if they sold a record or not. Oh, it's 92. I'm going to retire. I don't understand what that is.
Yeah. Well, just look at the three of us here on this show right now. We're all still dressed like we probably dressed when we were 15 years old.
I tell you what, I was a jeans and t-shirt guy in 1991, and I'm a jeans and t-shirt guy now, pretty much. I will say
I'm going to wear whatever Young wore.
There you go.
Malcolm Young. See, you walk into the store at the mall. Do you have a Malcolm Young? I'll take two.
There's nothing wrong. It's timeless. It works. It will work until we die and beyond. Yeah. I mean, I'm just a hair on the. Sorry, what's that?
It's a James Dean. It's classic. It's just your uniform, right?
Yeah, I'm just a little younger. I'm about to turn 49, so I'm very fortunate in that I did not, even though I started playing in bars when I was like 17 years old, I did not wear. There's no spandex photos of me floating around anywhere. It never happened. By that point, I was well into my Metallica, thrash phase, and I was listening to Anthrax and Megadeth and all that. But the thing was, even though I was in that phase, that was what I identified with as far as like what I felt and how I wanted to dress and stuff like that, jeans and t-shirt. And then of course the grunge thing comes in. And listen, I love music, so I didn't hate grunge or start loving grunge and then hate the old stuff. I will say musically, maybe I went that direction more at that time because that was what was being spoon fed to all of us by MTV and by radio stations and by labels and everything else. And there are records that I legitimately missed that were great albums that came out after that I've discovered later in life. I can say that about Cinderella, Still Climbing. That's a great album. And I guarantee you that I had never listened to that entire record until I started playing it at Band.
Yeah.
I heard a song or two. Same could be said for, I feel like Laurence Dog Eat Dog album is the best record they ever made.
They made that during the dark times.
Yeah. And it's a great, that's the record that gave me a full perspective of what a great songwriter Janie actually was. I think that second Badlands record is a dirty, swampy, killer rock and roll album,
Yeah.
There's although I love that record back then. But there's a lot of those records that I kind of discovered after the fact that there were bands that were capable of growing and transitioning with the times and still making great music that sounded like them but was cohesive to whatever was going on, but they just weren't given a chance, That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
So
I always say never break up the band because the weather changes. Just leave the window open. If those influences want to come in and they soak in and garner your attention, sometimes, that's fine. There's nothing. I'm pro reinvention.
Absolutely.
And to keep your open mind, that's completely up to the artist. And but doing it for the wrong reasons is flat out like, are you sure you're confused right now? Do you need to sit down?
Yeah.
Tell us about Brother Cane. How'd you end up in with Damon Johnson and Brother Cane? Talk about a great band that kind of flew under the radar and has what I think is, sort of that timeless quality to the songs. Brother Cane is definitely that.
Brother was another one in Cry of Love, the band called Love. Mm-hmm. They were kind of related in my brain for obvious reasons, but tell us about the Brother Cane stuff.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Cry of Love because I'm good friends with Audley and Robert, the guitar player and bass player, who both live here in Nashville. Robert's my neighbor, and Audley lives a few miles further down the road in East Nashville. I used to watch him when I lived in East Nashville. I used to watch him jog by my house every day. He runs like Forrest Gump. He runs constantly. So amazing guys, amazing band. Brother Cane, though. So where I grew up at in Illinois, there was a radio station over in Peoria, Rock 106, that was, one of the two big rock stations. You get the one in Peoria, you get 97X up in Davenport, Iowa, where I live. Those are kind of the two rock stations you can pick up. Or the smaller station, 92.7, the Laser in Galesburg, Illinois, which I actually DJ'd at in college briefly. But the program director at Rock 106 was a massive Brother Cane fan, to the point where Damon Johnson will tell you that it freaked them out the first time they played Peoria, because they went from playing a club for like 300 people the night before to walking into a sold out crazy show at the Madison Theater like the next night. And it was like nothing they'd ever experienced as a headlining band at that point. So I got exposed to them through that. I saw them at the Madison Theater. And I was always a fan. I've got all three of those records. I know them all really well. So years back when the flood happened in Nashville, my buddy Joe Glazer, who runs a guitar repair shop called Glazer Instruments here in Nashville, he had called me to come over and see if I would help kind of do musical instrument triage at Soundcheck rehearsal studios, because all these guitars and amps and everything were underwater, and all these musicians were on tour and things were just trashed, and they'd gotten the water out of there finally, but like I took, I told somebody the other day, I took the cover off of Peter Frampton's full guitar rig with his plexis and everything else, and water was pouring out of it. Like the shit was under like 8 feet of water. So I walk over and they kind of had everybody's stuff in the different lockers taped off in sections. And I walked up to this one section and it said Damon Johnson. I was like, no shit. And it was, gold top and a Strat and a couple things. And I started taking his guitars apart, pulling the electronics out, taking the covers off so things could dry out, and hoping they'd be salvageable. And somebody gave me his phone number and I called him. That was the first time I ever talked to Damon. And I just told him what I was doing. And we talked for a few minutes, and he was out with this country group he had at the time called Whiskey Falls. And so he was doing that, and we talked, and then he, thanks, and that was it. And, didn't talk to him again. So maybe a year later, I'm at Guitar Center working, and he comes in. Now, I'd never met him in person, so I walked up and introduced myself, and he goes, "Oh, you're the guy that worked on my guitars. Thank you. This one was salvageable, and this one has to get the neck refinished, but blah, blah, blah. Thank you so much for doing that." And we're talking. I was like, "So what are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I'm doing this and this and blah, 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 and Alice Cooper and this, that, and the other." And I go, "Cool." And he said something about Brother Cane. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "If you ever put Brother Cane back together, let me know. I want to be in that band." And I was just kind of half kidding, but half serious, because, you got to shoot your shot, right? But I didn't think anything of it. evidently, as Damon tells the story to other people, he says he went out to his car afterwards, like he bought some strings or some innocuous bullshit. He goes out to his car afterwards and sits down. His wife's in the car and he goes, "You're never going to believe this motherfucker in Guitar Center." So that was kind of our first meeting. So fast forward to, we've been around each other a few times after that, mutual friends, social settings, and I think oddly it reintroduced us at some point, and some different stuff like that. And I was doing one of those Chemokazi shows, and Damon had moved here. He lives out west in Nashville, and I got a hold of him. I was like, "Hey man, would you want to come do a couple songs? We're doing this All-Star benefit, and these people are playing and all that." It's like, "Absolutely, I'll be there." So he comes out and jams with us. It was really. He came over and did a rehearsal run through with us, and I could tell he was really pleasantly surprised at how prepared the band was, like we made sure, like we played Got No Shame and had that pocket locked in, and, Hard Act to Follow and whatever else we played with him that night, I can't even remember. But anyway, so we did that. He came out and he did the show and he had a great time, and, we got to know each other a little more. And my phone rang maybe a week later, or no, I take that back. A couple weeks later, we wind up on the Monsters of Rock cruise together. He was in Black Star Riders at the time. And so, yeah, we wind up, I'm on there with Keifer. He's on there with Black Star Riders. He came and watched our set, one of our sets in the theater on that cruise. Of course, I watched them because I think they're great. And then they had a jam on that cruise. Jason, you might have been on it, where they had like all the ex-members of Alice Cooper's band jam one night that were on the cruise. It comprised a full band. So it was like Kip and Damon and Carrie Kelly and Jimmy DeGrasso. And, they're just jamming old Alice songs. And then the jam kept going. And at one point, somebody said, "Let's do some Thin Lizzy." And Ricky Warwick was there. And like, "I don't know, what do we do? Let's do Jailbreak." And Kip Winger's like, "I don't know Jailbreak." And I happened to be standing there. I was like, "I do." And he goes, "You know it?" I was like, "Yeah." He just handed me the bass. So I walked up and I played Jailbreak with him. And anyways, after that, I get home a few days later after the cruise. Damon calls me and he goes, "Hey man, would you have any interest in coming out and playing some shows with my solo band?" He goes, "I know you're busy with Keifer. I know that's your priority. We can do shows as a trio, but I'd love it if you came out and played some shows with us, because a lot of that stuff is just anchored onto guitars." I was like, "Yeah, man, that sounds great." So I went and did 2 like warm-up gigs with them at a little podunk bars, like sports bars in Kentucky and stuff like that. And then we recorded a live album in Birmingham. So there's a live album, Damon Johnson, Birmingham Tonight. And that's like the 3rd show I'd ever played with them.
Wow.
So I did shows with them, but there would be times where the budget would really only constitute him being able to go out as a trio. And I would have to sit stuff out. So it's like I go to do a few shows with them, and then they go do a tour with Clutch, and I'd have to stay home. I go do a few shows with them, they go do a tour with the Winery Dogs, and I'd have to stay at home, And I didn't mind it in the sense that I was busy with Tom. I was busy with the East Side Gamblers. I had a lot on my plate. But then it got to a point, especially, as I was getting through my divorce and kind of trying to get myself back together, where he has such a big catalog of material, and he would like write a set list 20 minutes before you walk on stage. So you'd have like a 40, 45 song working list, he'd write a 16 song set list, but you had to know it all. So I'd have to retain all this material every so often to go out and do a couple shows with him and then stay at home for a couple months. Wow, that's like, dude, listen, man, you're in a trio situation. It's totally cool. I need to focus on some other stuff. I can't keep relearning this material, and so I kind of tapped out for a while, and he then turned the band into Damon Johnson and the Get Ready. They made a killer album with Nick Raskulinix, and they went and started doing some shows, and then the pandemic happened. So after the pandemic starts to wind down, Damon had just started subbing for Gary Rossington and Skinner. Skinner, I think the original thought, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I think the original idea was, Gary's going to come back, but it'd be good to have Damon out here in case Gary can't do the whole show. Let's have Damon's trio open. So it was like the Get Ready, Tesla, and then Skinnerd, you know? So it's like, great. Damon evidently, you know, due to whatever, the bass player, the original bass player to Get Ready, couldn't do those shows. He couldn't go out. And Damon started scrambling, trying to find a bass player. And he called the bass player that had been in the band with me and him. Before that, he called Chuck Garrick. Chuck was over in Europe, and he called a couple other people. But that bass player that had been in the band before, Tony Nagy, who is a luthier over at Gruen Guitars, he called Damon back and he goes, "Hey, did you find anybody?" And he goes, "No." And he goes, "Well, why don't you call Higbee?" And he goes, "What?" And he goes, "You know, Tony Higbee's a bass player, right?" And he goes, "Oh shit, I forgot about that." He goes, "Call Higbee. He already knows the songs. He just needs to learn on bass." So I still have like my SVT rig and my P bass and all that stuff. So I went out after the pandemic. I hadn't played in 2 years. The first shows I did were in arenas playing with Damon on bass, opening for Skinnerd. So we did, yeah, right. So we did some shows like that, and it was a blast, and you know, had a great time. And then Damon started kicking around, putting Brother Cane back together at the urging of his manager, Kevin Lee. And because Kevin's like, "Man, you got this brand, you've got these great albums, you've got these great songs. If you're going to do anything with it, you need to do something with it now. And I think I can, you know, give it some legs." And so Damon's like, "All right, if you know, if you'll help me with it, you being Kevin, let's dig in on it." And so they did, and they put this reconstituted version of the band together. Now the guitar player that was with him for those last couple of records, Dave Anderson, has been playing with Atlanta Rhythm Section now for like 20 plus years. Like, that's his gig. And Dave's just a super sweet, talented guy. The drummer, I'm not sure what he does or if he plays at all anymore, really. Roman Glick, of course, plays in Jackal and has forever. Right. So, you know, when Damon put the band together, he reached out to the original bass player, Glenn Maxey, and drug him out. And Glenn is just a great bass player, the sweetest guy. And kind of started that as the nucleus. Brought in Jared Pope, who's also the drummer in the Tom Keifer band with me, and he brought in Buck Johnson on keys. So they went out and they did their first few shows with just one guitar player and a keyboard player. And there were never keys predominantly in Brother Cane, but if you listen to that first record, there's some stuff on there, piano and B3, and it's all Chuck Leavell. And so, and Buck is just a mega talent, man. He's a killer keyboard player, he's a killer singer. He's, you know, I mean, he's the guy that backs up Steven Tyler with Aerosmith. You know, he plays keys in Aerosmith and does that. That's his main gig. So they went out and did a few shows, I guess. And I remember when I heard he put it back together and he didn't call me, I was like, that motherfucker, you know? And I was like, it was cool. I was like, well, he's got Buck. Yeah, I'm sure he's got the bases covered. So I guess they went out and they did a few shows. And Kevin was like, "Hey, man, sounds great." Damon was like, "Thanks." He goes, "But you need another guitar player." And Damon goes, "All right, I'm calling Tony Higbee." So he called me up, and I started doing shows with him. And it's turned out to be great because obviously there's some shows that Buck can't be there for because he's busy with Aerosmith. You might have heard of them. They sold a couple records. Yeah. And so, you know, and Brother Cane traditionally back in the day operated as a 4-piece rock band with 2 guitar players, bass player, and drummer. So that band can absolutely roll like that. And then when you have Buck there, it's just a little added icing to the cake. But, you know, we started doing those shows last year. They went great. And now we got a whole fall run coming up that's looking like it could be pretty crazy and fairly exhausting in a short period of time. And I'm looking forward to seeing if I can still keep up. So, yeah.
Well, so the fact that you are, you know, can in theory stay busy half the year with Tom and busy half the year with Damon, sounds like you got a good thing going, sprinkled with your own shit in between.
Man, I'm blessed in that sense. And, you know, what's really helping is, what helps that is that Damon is going to be out with Skinnerd, generally speaking, at the same time that myself and Jared are going to be out with Tom, you know, Jared being the drummer.
Yeah.
And so those schedules are generally going to overlap, and we're usually going to have the same pockets of time open after the summer touring season winds down. We're going to have the fall, winter, and early spring for the most part, you know? And it's really worked out these last couple of years like that. So, you know, we're just kind of rolling with it and seeing how it shakes out, but it's been great.
All you kids out there, this is why you need an agent, or another name for an agent is calendar magician.
Yeah.
One thing that helps us greatly is that Brother Cane and Tom Keifer share the same booking agency.
That helps. Yeah.
Yes.
Winning one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So given all of your musical talent and your vocal ability, and now you're building a reputation, when do we get the first Tony Higbee solo record?
Man, I don't know. First off, Tony Higbee doesn't roll off the tongue. Like, I can't see that on a marquee, you know?
Why not?
I mean, Jason McMaster's a cool fucking name. Tony Higbee is like, yeah, I've been watching people butcher that thing since I was a kid. They spell it with a Y instead of two E's, or they put this imaginary H in between the G and the B, so it looks like Higbee. That's always a fun one. I can't, and I'm way too late in the game to come up with a fresh stage name, So
reading and saying your name just fine the whole time. So I get it.
Yeah. I've always loved operating.
Hello, may I speak to Jason McKinson, sir?
People always put an S on the end of Jason's name. He gets called Jason McMasters all the time. I don't know how it doesn't drive you crazy, but I see it in print. I hear it when people talk about him, and I've gotten past the point of correcting them because they're just helpless.
My word,
man. But
you've got a solo album. I know you've got a solo album, if not more than one, in you. So is there any chance of it ever coming out, even if you don't change your name?
Well, I mean, listen, in the context of a lot of my bands, I've done a lot of the writing.
Tony Rabbit Hole.
Tony Rabbit Hole. We're going back to that.
We started this ride this with Tony Rabbit Hole because I went down a Tony Rabbit. Anyway, sorry.
Oh no, I love it.
Laughing at my shit. So.
Or I could just call myself Tony. One more Tony than the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be two less people, but it's like, yeah. Anyways, I mean, I love operating in the context of a band. Like, I love the brotherhood of standing in a room and making and creating music with a band, and and I feel like there's absolutely more of that for me, on the horizon. I kind of got a little, when the last thing kind of fizzled out, it kind of burnt me out a little bit creatively and bummed me out a little bit, and I wasn't feeling all that creative. But once again, I made it a point to try not to force it. And now the ideas are, going again and, picking up a pencil, writing lyrics and stuff like that. And that's happening. And so, yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I don't know that you're ever going to see Tony Higbee on the marquee anywhere, but I'll definitely.
Well, here's what I was getting at. I wasn't necessarily implying that you put together a solo album with you on every instrument and you. I'm talking about a band that you sort of lead in front. So it would still be the band and a brotherhood and all this. Like, you and Ace Von Johnson haven't talked about putting a band together.
So I'm going to plead the fifth right now.
Oh, I might have hit on something here.
Oh,
and Ace hasn't told me anything. I just know you guys are good.
No.
Sorry, what's that, Jason?
Said the bell just got rung.
Yeah, no, listen, there have been more than conversations with Ace. We've gotten in a room and we've hammered out some ideas, and got another friend or two involved in that also. And we have, when schedules permit, I think we're definitely going to make some music, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be some straight ahead rock and roll, checking all the appropriate boxes in terms of all the right influences, everything that we're all into. I feel some Lizzie-esque moments coming on, and some guitar harmonies and, all the fun stuff, and, just big, loud, punky edge, because if Ace is involved, it's going to get that added to it, in spades, which is great,
Right.
And there's nothing I love more than a good, dirty rock and roll band. But at the end of the day, if it's a good, dirty rock and roll band with great songs, then that's, even better. Cause, I like we were talking about, some of the stuff we listened to. I mean, I feel like there's a whole period that I really got into in the late 90s, early 2000s of bands that really hit on all cylinders of the things that I love about rock and roll and the spirit of rock and roll. Towards the top of that list would absolutely be Danko Jones, as we were talking about earlier with Jason.
Yeah, he kind of, but he saved it all for me. I was like really bummed out on what was happening, and I heard Danko Jones. I heard The Darkness before most, because a friend of mine in Europe sent a CD over, and I was like, I couldn't hang. Danko too was like Born a Lion. It's the early shit. And I was like,
oh yeah, that album slays.
So yeah, I was a believer right away. And then of course I turned all my friends onto it, including Dave. So
yeah.
I just got his new one. I got an advance copy.
Came out today.
Oh, did it come out today?
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah. It's what you want from Danko Jones.
Absolutely. But man, some of those other bands too, like the Backyard Babies, the Helicopters, the Gaza Strippers,
now you're talking
Supergroup.
Yes, Supergroup.
I love Supergroup. The Wild Hearts, man. The Wild Hearts are one of my favorite bands of all time, and so many people in the States just don't even know anything about them. So there's so many just great rock and roll bands out there. There was that whole Scandinavian movement there in the early 2000s for a second that was killer, and I thought there's a lot of spirit in that stuff that kind of rekindled my fire, at that time, and it's carried on. And I love it. I'm, like I said, a fan first and foremost.
Yeah. Here's a fun fact for you before we leave. You're a Wild Hearts fan. Ginger recorded, I think it was his first solo record here in outside of Austin at Willie Nelson's studio. And he called me and had me come down to the studio, and I ended up doing a spoken word outro on one of the songs. So if you have that album, it's called El Corazon or something Corazon.
I'd have to look. I guarantee you I have that. All my CDs are to the left of me, and there's about 1,500 of them. But I have that record.
Go look later on. There's a song called Love, Love. It's punctuated Love, and I'm the creepy voice doing the outro at the end of that.
Nice. I can hear you doing a good creepy voice.
That's what Ginger said. He's like, he goes, "Oh, mate, your voice is terrifying."
A good compliment. If someone says your voice is terrifying.
Yeah, I was like, hey, I think we were just hanging out talking in the studio, and I was there for hours. First, he asked me if I knew how to play piano, and I don't, because his piano player was a no-show, and he's like, "Oh, I need someone to play piano on this track." And so I sat there and watched him, and it was just me and him and an engineer, and he started plunking around on the keys, and in about 15 minutes he had it, and he played whatever he wanted to play. And then he said, he wanted me, he heard my voice, and we had talked over the phone before, but I think it was the first time we'd spent extended period of time together. And he's like, "I want you to do something on this record, man, some sort of vocal thing, like at the end of Night Prowler of AC/DC, where he goes, Shazbot, Nanu Nanu, just some sort of weird, creepy thing that takes a twist at the last minute." So he wrote down some words on a napkin, and I recited them. I'd never even been in a vocal booth before, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've met Ginger a couple times. My old band, actually Bombshell Crush, opened for the Wild Hearts in Atlanta one time at a little club called the Earl, and that was like awesome. And when he was putting together Silver Ginger 5, which was that, kind of one of those solo things he did one of the many times that the Wild Hearts had split up.
Yeah.
He was asking for demos from musicians, and I actually sent him one, and he sent me a really nice response. I was straight out of college. I hadn't even got to Atlanta yet. This would have been like, 99, very early 2000. And it was a song called Chrome. It was a very power poppy, I was way down a jellyfish rabbit hole at the time, and I played the bass and guitar and did all these vocals, and had Queen harmonies on it, just this crazy, ridiculous, overblown shit on an 8-track. And I sent it to him, and he messaged me back, and he basically said, something really nice and effective. But of all the things that I've received so far, this is by far the most in-depth, well executed thing I've heard. It's really great. Unfortunately, you're just way too good looking to be in this band. He goes, I'm looking for some sort of scary Nikki Sixx rock monster, and you're way too pretty a blonde guy. And I was just like, yeah, I can't. I mean, there's no. How do you argue that? You're
Right.
saying, all right, well, okay.
These standards are so low,
Clearly. Like, what I'll cut my hair off and spike it all black, and I'll go rush out and get like 2 sleeves of tattoos next week.
No.
Well,
No.
I do. I think we're going to hear a Tony Higbee album somewhere down the line. It might not be called Tony Higbee. It might be under a band name. It might, you might call it something else. But a guy like you, I think, has too much bottled up to not let it out somehow. So we won't hold it to you. No pressure. But I'm saying it now. I think somewhere down the line we're going to hear it.
And the unstoppable force.
Tony Higbee and the unstoppable force. So
Bottled up in him, like Dave says, it's a turgid moment for Tony.
I'm gonna name. I'm gonna get like 4 more dudes in the band, and I'm just gonna call the band Higbee and the McMasters 4.
Okay.
That kind of rolls off the tongue. I know. They're gonna be like, wait, who are the McMasters? All these guys.
And then the S on the end of the name would actually make sense.
There's an old Western called The McMasters, actually.
Nice. Wait, so since we're on here and we're asking questions, what are you guys up to next? What are you doing next, Jason?
We just played in Austin. We just played the Whiskey, and we just played in Denver. And
so is this who is we right now?
Boys.
Okay.
And then we're playing in Massachusetts in a couple of weeks. But throughout all of this, I'm doing reunion shows with my old prog metal thrash band, Watchtower. And we just played in San Antonio. In a couple of weeks, we're playing in Germany. And then we're playing in here again in January. And then we're playing in Houston in March. So it's spotted, but it's the only way that it's like leapfrog. And all about that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But then in between that, I'm doing like tomorrow I'm playing with Broken Teeth. Have you heard Broken?
Yep.
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah.
Yes. Rob Hammersmith hit me to Broken Teeth back in like 2002.
Oh, yes. Yeah. We're still doing it. We have new songs, but we're lazy, slow. We work slow. Doing that tomorrow. I'm looking forward to that, actually. And then I have a power metal band called Igniter, and Igniter is playing again in a couple of weeks. And we open for Saxon and Grim Reaper and the like, Hellstar, and we usually do shows like that. It's a lot of fun. So I'm what I call busy enough, but I've been teaching for 18 years for School of Rock. So I'm busy enough. So
I love it. That's awesome.
I'll be here mowing my grass, but thanks for asking.
No, that was my next question. What are you doing? What are you up to?
Nothing nearly as exciting as that.
Well,
actually,
this is Tony, not about me, but thank you for asking, Tony.
Hey, you know what? You're just diversifying, Jason. I'm over here taking notes. Your portfolio is diverse.
The boys are on the cruise, by the way, coming up in March. Are you on that?
We're not. We haven't been on the cruise since I'm trying to think here. Like I think we did the cruise in 2019.
Okay.
And we haven't been on it since. We did the cruise in 19. We didn't do it in 20, and then there was no cruise in 21, I don't think.
Yeah, that was
Yeah. And then we did that Monsters on the Mountain thing at the end of last year. So, kind of like half taking the cruise and moving it to the sticks in Tennessee, out in Pigeon Forge. Have you done that yet?
Yeah, we did that going on 2 years ago now. And
Yeah, we
fun,
did.
like that. It was like Monsters of Rock cruise people, but in the mountains.
Yeah, exactly.
Just fine. You know, Queensryche, Tesla, all of it was.
Yeah.
Hey, we're not on a boat.
Yeah, exactly. So we did it last year, tail end of the year, and I think it was our last show last year. And then yeah, you know, my last shows at Keifer are coming up this not tomorrow, but like actually I leave on Wednesday and I'm gone for a few days to do a couple shows out in New Mexico. The second show of which LA Guns is opening for us, so that'd be great to see those guys again.
Yeah.
And then I come home and then I go do a one-off with Brother Cane in Arkansas on October 14th. That's the first date with them. And then we do a couple more shows, 26th and 27th of October. And then we leave on Halloween night and get on a bus and we do 17 shows in 19 days.
Whoa.
So
Old school.
yeah.
Wow.
Totally old school.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not Damon Johnson. So I'm glad I don't have to sing 17 shows in 19 days.
Oh, really? Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, Tony, man, thank you so much for spending some of your free time with us. I know we caught you in between gigs, and we do appreciate you making some time for us. Your great buddy Ace Von Johnson told us we need to have you on the show, and we immediately said, yeah, why not? We definitely need to do that, and it was worth every minute. So thanks for spending your time with us. Continued success with everything you do. We're happy that you're healthy. It was nice meeting you. It was really cool hanging out with you. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you in person somewhere down the road with one of your many bands. On behalf of my co-host Jason McMaster, I'm Metal Dave, along with our special guest today, Tony Higbee, on the Talk Louder podcast.